Hello, good evening. Welcome to this screening of Fashion and Cinema. And without much ado, please welcome with me Madeline and Kinvera.
Good evening, everyone. I've got so much to ask Madeline in quite a short amount of time, so we have to bear with me if I'm quite quick. So I want to just say thank you all so much for being here. It's an honor for me to be doing something with fashion and cinema. I'm such a huge fan of everything they do, and I'm such a huge fan of Madeline. And aside from her work in Jackie, which is spectacular, and you'll get to see everything in a minute, she's worked on some incredible films, and also my favorite TV show, Versailles, which is absolutely fantastic. And if you've seen it, you'll know that the costumes are some of the best that have ever appeared on TV. And she's just told me they've done season 2 and they're filming season 3, so that's great news. So I want to talk to you about Jackie, and I also want to talk to you about how you actually started in the industry to get to this point. But I think first, we should really talk about the film, how it came about, how it came into your life, and how you set about getting your mind into the era that she belonged in, because it's such an iconic time. And I wonder whether you were very familiar with that time personally, or whether you had to do a lot of research.
Well, the research was not so difficult because it's such a big amount of documents, and the set design started before us, and they had already an enormous dossier about the events. But for me, it was, well, yeah, I remember what happens, but it's not part of my story directly, and that was the challenge, not to betray anything, because it's so very much in the memory of American people, in their history. So it was a bit, sensitive to be on this path, and and help the actress, which is incredible, but help her to go into this character as easily as possible.
And when you're researching something like Jackie, which we know what she wore and one has to really replicate that, do you decide that you're going to go to the fashion houses that were famously connected with her and source things that they would have made, or are you always in the way that you work, would you make everything yourself?
We had to do everything ourselves because for the pink costumes we had to make like 5 samples. Really? Of course, because it's of course we shoot first when it's bloody, and then the accident arrives, and we had to make some tests at the camera to make sure that it was the right pink to have the good result after the choice of the camera and the treatment of the image. So we did it all ourselves in the workshop. And anyway, this costume is someone closed under keys for years. And I think I did like I ever do, starting from pictures or paintings, or, and then we do it. It's an interpretation. So for this one, we did the same. And for the red one of Dior, when she's traveling into the White House and presenting the White House and the work she made in it, it was a dress from Dior, but even for this one, we had to choose to do it ourselves.
And where do you source the fabric and the buttons, some of the finishes? Because I did read that you'd gone with the pink suit, which, if no one is aware, with this pink suit, which she was wearing during the assassination, so she's looking very, very chic, and then this suit becomes covered in blood. It's an iconic pink suit that was made by Chanel, or we don't know that it was made by Chanel, but it's famously aligned with Chanel. What's the story behind that?
I think it's really made by Chanel, because we've been on the way to find the lady who made the fabric. She was a weaver, you say that?
A weaver, yeah.
A weaver, and that's what her first contract with Chanel, so I know for sure it was a Chanel one. And she was ready, not her, but the house was ready to make it again for us, the fabric, but we couldn't do that because we had to make sure of the color before, and we had to choose the thread, and it was too far away and too short in the time not to do it by ourselves, like dyeing a fabric we found and go on.
And with the buttons, does Chanel... I didn't know this, but for anybody, Chanel has some kind of button library that anybody can actually go to and try and replace what they've lost. Is that right?
I never had a costume from Chanel, but I know that Elsa Heitzmann, which is in charge of the press at Chanel, called me and said, why didn't you ask us to make the costume? I answered what I just told you, and she said, but we could give you the galon and the buttons and some little details which are really Chanel. I said, okay. And then we had to prove that our technical way of doing it and the colors and everything was right. And then they approved it and gave us the buttons, the little chain which is inside to make the right weight of the jacket, just in case it falls down and you can see it. And the label of this period too. But, we had to do it by ourselves. It was too short and too difficult, too tricky. The red one we had to make red, and we had to make pink too, because we used footage, and then we had to shoot in black and white too. And in black and white, the red was too dark. I mean, it's just technical, but it's just explaining why we couldn't put it too far away from our control.
You see all this work that goes into all these things that we never realize. How involved was Natalie Portman with you as an actress in the film? How involved does she get in what might fit, what might suit? Is a neck made less boat neck because it's more suitable on her, or you're just saying this is what Jackie wore and you're going to wear it?
It was just what Jackie wore, but Natalie has not at all the proportion that Jacqueline Bouvier had. So we had to adapt. And of course, we have to adapt with the complicity of the actress. And she's so professional. I mean, it was very nice to work with her.
I'm sure. Now, when it comes to the undergarments, because we see her often in her petticoats, were these modern handmade petticoats, or do you go to these vintage shops and find underwear of that time so that the character can feel kind of prepared underneath?
It's a mixture. I mean, we found some pieces. We'll see when you see the movie, then it's a moment where she is going from one outfit to another. She's just looking for a way. And then we had some vintage things that we found at collectors and a vintage shop. And she has also, the underwear is one new but looking like exactly on the type of the one which were made on that time. And some others are vintage, but it's always a bit like that. You take what you can nowadays to take the public to the period.
Have you found, I've heard and understood that in terms of finding the real vintage items, that in fact the vintage supplies of the world have been so plundered by fashion and everybody that it's actually really hard to find these real genuine items anymore, whereas 10 years ago there was just such a surplus because vintage wasn't sort of in the mainstream. Is that something you'd agree with, or do you have your secret sources?
No, it's true. What you say is very true, but there are still some collectors which work with the labels. And then I used to meet them when I worked on Saint Laurent, YSL, huh? And then I know who has what. As haute couture pieces. Not sure what I could find there, but try at least. And in the rental houses also, there are some very interesting pieces of these periods.
The rental houses. So for the film, we were talking. You said there's amazing rental houses in LA and also in France. So you were going between the two in order to get, as well as always for the men's costumes as well. Is it easy when you book in, and are you spending days in these warehouses sourcing what you want to put on, or is it easy?
You need time because you just drop piece by piece. But we started in France because we shot all the part which is inside the White House in France. The set was built in a studio in France. And then we had a very short time of shooting in USA, in Washington, because we needed the outside of the buildings. And there in the States, I had to go to Los Angeles because there are no other rental houses closer to Washington. And then we started again to make all the crowd, because we did that in Paris already for the funeral part, which is inside. And we started again outside in Los Angeles.
It's funny to me that for me it is so American-based, the actual film, that you forget that one can create something anywhere. The White House itself, when you were on set, did you feel that you were there in this sort of on set, in this very important, exciting building that's seen so much history? Were you drawn in some way by the interior and everything? Because it's so iconic.
Yeah, and it was very impressive because our DP, Madeline Fontaine, used to light from the top. So you had no cables on the floor, you had nothing. And then he could be able to follow Natalie here. He was really here. And then she could go where she wanted, and he was following. So it was, the set was free of every technical things which are always on the floor and everywhere, the lights and the cables and so on. So the impression was stronger because of that. Yeah, you had this white carpet on the long corridor, and all the paintings which were made by hand, for real. The flowers were incredible too. It was a little shop with the flowers behind the set, and she changes the flower from set to set every day. Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Now, talking with the men's costumes, is this, because the era is very specific to some of the fabrics and the textures you have to keep true to, but obviously, as you've said, you actually have to create them yourself. Was it easy to recreate the men's suits, or did you find it hard to get that authenticity?
It is hard. I've been lucky because we found some fabric which was real, from that time. Yeah, for the costume of, which one was it? JFK or Bobby, I don't remember, but we found one like that. It has not the same weight, so it doesn't fit the same, of course. And it's sometimes a problem, the fabric, yeah.
And where do all these costumes go when the film is over, when any film is over? I'm always very interested to know where everything goes, when so much work has gone into it. What, do you feel attached?
No, I don't, I can't. If it's something not too recognizable, I try to make the production give it to the rental houses, because we need to be, they have to be fed some way by some new pieces. And when it's too recognizable, then we keep it, because it's difficult. Imagine you could see a dress that you made for someone on a new first roll on something else. Is very strange. I've been asked many times to give the things to the Cinémathèque in Paris or in Toulouse, but it's not my property anyway. The production decides what they do with that.
Yeah, I always wonder where everything goes. How did you? So you're nominated for a BAFTA. You're nominated for an Oscar. You have quite a few busy weeks ahead. How did you start this journey? What was the first time when you, as a young or that you decided that you were really into costume? What influence was in your life that brought you to this point?
I would say it's by chance. I was in art school, and I knew that I had, this kind of sensitivity which could bring me to a work attached to these capacities, but I didn't know what exactly. And I met someone on a project of film, which was looking for someone to help. Just very few days. It was in Provence, and I used to live in Provence at that time by choice. And she didn't know the vintage shop, she didn't know how to sew, and she needed someone to help. And then I helped at the beginning for 1 week, and then I stayed a little bit more. And I realized at that time that it could be a universe and a work where I could be useful and happy. So I decided to learn from that time. And then I worked with a lot of designers before I worked on my own.
Okay. And I know that you worked on some films like Manon Dessources and Jean de Florette, which were very iconic, still are iconic. Was that an exciting time for cinema? Because in those days, we saw those costumes really just at the cinema. Now I feel we can see the costumes so much before the film. In a way, you fall in love with them, but then you also kind of watch and you go, I know that. But in that time, with some of those things, is the first time people were seeing them. Did you feel there was more impact from the cinema for costume, or are you actually happy now with the internet and the fact that we can see anyone's work much more in advance of the movie coming out?
I think it's a pity we see these things too much in advance. I think the surprise and the emotion which goes with the surprise is a bit cut by that way. But
yeah, it is what it is. What are some of the highlights that you've had within the film on Jackie and some of the other things you've worked on? What's your favorite? Is it the end when everything's on set and you've done it, or do you like the beginning process when you don't know what you're going to do and you're starting to read books and look at references?
I think any step has its interest and its stress too. But it's never finished. When you start, you know that every day will be the day where you have to deliver something. And still it's not in the frame, it's not done. So, I mean, the work is going on till the end. And you don't even know, you don't have the distance to know if what you're doing is right until it's finished. Because it's like at each moment, you try to make it the best you can. And you have the idea of what is very important, but you don't know if it's going to work or not. Not really. I mean, you have to trust yourself and the people you work with, because it's it's the alchemy of many things. I mean, it depends on many things that you can't control.
Yeah, it is team. I'm just going to end and say, what would be your advice to anyone in the audience who's starting out or wanting a career in costume design? What would be your advice to them? How would you get started? Start working for another costume designer, create your own clothes, walk around the museums. What can get somebody sort of a leg up on this quite very competitive industry?
Yeah, it's very competitive, but I think it's not only one way, and it's no recipe for that. I think you have to be curious. I think, of course, you have to go to museum and see many kind of, of art and expression and creation. You have to work with some others which have the experience. But you also have to be open to any kind of information you can take, even have a sharp eye on what the costume or just the clothes on some people could tell you about them or their character. I mean, we're not working for the look in the cinema. We're working to create a character. And it's according to the vision of the director, but also the feeling of the actor, which is going to go to himself, from himself to the character. It's a skin. It's something very important. And I think the clothes are very much talking about the personality of people inside, more or less, but they give indications.
So interesting. It's so interesting. Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Enjoy the film. It's absolutely beautiful. Natalie Portman does an incredible performance, but the clothes really do share, for me, they are a very, very big part of the film. And I want to thank Madeline. You've been such a great... It's just been so nice to work with you and meet with you. And I want to wish you luck in the next few weeks and days with the BAFTAs and the Oscars and everything. I don't know if you have all your own wardrobe planned, but I'm sure that must be quite a pressure.
It won't be a pink suit.
Okay, no pink suit. No pink suit. Well, we'll look and we'll be keeping our fingers crossed for you. Thank you so much, and thank you to Fashion and Cinema. Thank you.